Well, Jude, welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us. Now, you started a new job at the beginning of the year. You're the Family Violence Advocate for Presbyterian Support Northern. So what does that mean?
It means that I'm their representative in the nation against family violence. Any arena or any work that's being done around family violence, I will represent Presbyterian Support and be their spokesperson. And I guess it's also about bringing that touch of reality through my own story. And because of the work that Presbyterian Support do in the nation around family work, it just is good for them to have the voice out there as well.
Now, you mentioned you have a story. I've read your book. Mm-hmm. It is a story like none I've read before. Mm-hmm. You're in a unique position to give that sort of support, aren't you? Tell us a bit about. Tell us a little bit about your early childhood. Let's go back to when you were 9 or 10 and your parents separated.
Up until then, I hadn't known violence of any type. I lived quite a happy, normal childhood up until then, and then I was introduced to violence, and that was through a stepmother with two families merging, and it was the story of the stepmother wanting my father but not wanting myself, and my sister was there at that stage as well, and she just introduced us to extreme violence.
That's horrific, some of the things you describe in your book.
Yeah, she was very mean, she was quite vicious, she was very frightening. Again, I was a child then, so as we look at bigger people when we're young, they seem even bigger and meaner, but she was extremely abusive and horrible.
So you'd built a sort of almost a shell around yourself to protect yourself?
Very much so. Very much so. And that's another thing that even to this day has an effect on me,
The things we do to our children.
The things we do to our children, that you think that you don't realise what it's doing to them, but the effect that it's having on them and the hold that it's taking on them, that will manifest itself and come out years and years and years later.
Now, when you were 14, you were sent away from your father and your stepmother, and you went to live with your mother in New Plymouth. Now that must have been a relief.
It was mixed emotions. It was a relief because it meant that I wasn't going to get beaten anymore, but even bigger than that, it meant I was leaving my father. And because I didn't have a relationship with my mother, and because I loved my dad so much, I was leaving the only person I've ever loved or I've ever felt love from. So it was mixed emotions. But the way I got through it is I blocked out the pain of my father and just started to think about, right, I can have this now, because that's the only way I could get through that separation from him.
So did you settle in when you went to New Plymouth?
No, not at all.
Why?
Why? Because I never felt a sense of loving or belonging there. My mother may have tried. I didn't see it, but we just never got on. And I just missed my father so much. I didn't feel love of any kind, so I was rebellious, basically went out and did whatever I wanted, really. So
you were pregnant at 16?
Which led to a teenage pregnancy at 16.
Reading between the lines of the book, that the father that you married, it doesn't sound like he was necessarily a bad person, just that he wasn't ready for that responsibility.
And that's very correct. He wasn't a bad person. He was forced into a situation that he didn't want to be in, but did what we had to do because of what both our families were saying. So he wasn't at all.
Not long after that, your parents both died within a few months of each other, which seems to have thrown you completely.
It did. It did. My father's death just hit me terribly. But I never really let anyone know how hard that hit, because I never had really anyone to go to share that with. That was just devastating. And I think what made it worse was that he died knowing that I had got pregnant, and disappointed him so much, and that was really hard to deal with. It still is. And then, of course, just a few months later, my mother died of cancer. And even though I never had a close relationship with my mother, I liked it. She was still my mother, so it meant that there was someone there for me.
And I suppose when you look at all the things that had happened to you up to that stage, it's probably not surprising that that marriage fell apart?
Oh, it was inevitable. Yeah. It couldn't have worked. There was no foundation for it to have worked on, and become anything, really good. That it just couldn't have worked.
And then you drifted into a relationship with a man from the Mongrel mob.
Yep.
That then started a cycle of abuse and violence that continued long beyond the relationship with Tony from the gang. Why does that happen? Why is it that you get stuck in that cycle and you can't break it?
Okay. I believed that I was unworthy, unlovable, that no one could ever want anything. Want someone like me, that I was dumb, stupid, just all those things. So that's what I believed. So I changed partner, changed location, but nothing inside changed. The belief system was still exactly the same. So for me, I had to go into the very core of who I was and change my belief system.
So what happened when you were 37? Because something happened.
Yeah.
And the cycle broke.
It did, and it was through meeting a person. I call her my angel. She was a facilitator of a course that I was sent to by Work and Income, and I remember her very clearly saying to me, if you could change the way you think and change your belief around who you are and different things, she said, with your story, you could impact this nation by helping other women. And she stayed with me the whole way through. She never left my side, and she taught me, and she guided me, and she mentored me, and she loved me, and she just became absolutely everything to me. And she showed me how to turn it around, and that's how I know that it can work, because I've done it myself.
So what's your advice then to people, because there are hundreds of women who are trapped in that cycle? What can they do to help themselves?
It's really hard, because part of me wants to go to them myself, because you do need somebody. It's stopping the negative thoughts from controlling you and starting to believe that you deserve the best. It's hard. The discipline involved is absolutely huge, because some of us are having to change belief systems that are years and years old. But I would just say, just for our women to start believing in themselves in a different way than they have been, because until that changes, nothing's going to change in them.
I know that you're a member of a church. Does your faith help you get through things like that?
It definitely does, but I never always had my faith. And yet God always had his hand on me. I just didn't know it. And even though I still have things that come and get me from the past, I go straight to my faith now and try and remember who God's called me to be. So it does help me a lot. I couldn't be without it, really.
You say, I know many of the things that you do now, you go out, you're a motivational speaker, you talk to a lot of women. Do you ever find that you despair because you've seen what happened to you and you know it's happening to other people?
I don't. I used to get quite emotionally involved, because I have such a heart for these women, and I think that's where my motivation and my drive comes from, because I just can't stand the thought of women suffering how I suffered. It's just a horrible, hideous way to be living, and it's painful and it hurts. But I've had to really be careful, because some of the things that I see are just so hurtful. But there's so many people working in our industry who see these things, so I guess that's about us getting united and getting out there and doing more and more and more.
Do you think the fact that you've written it all down and that other people are reading it and learning from it and experiencing the hope that comes from it, do you think that's helped you?
Definitely, but I think God's brought me to a place where I'm okay anyway, but I will always use my story to help others. So I've put it in the place where it needs to be. What I'm doing is what I believe God has called me to do. It's what my whole life has been about. So I don't get affected by it. All it is about is using it in any way I can to help.
You're a remarkable woman. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.